lazy, the laziest girl in the world. I sleep during the day when I want to, till my face is creased and swollen, till my lips are dry and hot. I eat as I please, cookies and milk after lunch, butter and sour cream on my baked potato, foods that slothful people eat, that turn yellow and opaque beneath the skin. Sometimes, come dinner time Sunday, I am still in my nightgown, the one with the lace trim listing because I have not mended it. Many days I do not exercise, only consider it, then rub my curdy belly and lie down. Even my poems are lazy. I use syllabics instead of iambs, prefer slant to the gong of full rhyme, write briefly while others go for pages. And yesterday, for example, I did not work at all. I got in my car and I drove to factory outlet stores, purchased stockings and panties and socks with my father's money. To think, in childhood, I missed only one day of school per year. I went to ballet class 4 days a week, and at 4:45 and on Saturdays, beginning always with plie, ending with curtsy. To think, I knew only industry, the industry of my race and of immigrants, the radio always tuned always to the station that said, line up your summer job months in advance. Work hard and do not shame your family, who worked hard to give you what you have. There's no sin but sloth. Burn to a wick and keep moving. I avoided sleep for years, up at night replaying evening news stories about nearby jailbreaks, fat people who ate fried chicken and woke up dead. In sleep, I am looking for poems in the shape of open V's of birds flying in formation, or open arms saying, I forgive you all. In the early days of Methodism, there were preachers that were called circuit riders, preachers who would ride into town on a horse, and they were responsible for several parishes, several churches. And so they would travel between these churches, these congregations, every couple weeks or every couple months. And sometimes they had lots and lots of churches that they were serving. So they would ride between these congregations to preach and offer the Eucharist, offer communion, and teach and strengthen the churches as they traveled. And their first stop, the circuit riders' first stop when they pulled into town on their horse, was the town bar. They would pull in, go into the bar and pull out all the Methodists, telling them to go home, taking them to their homes so they could get back home and stop spending money at the bar. This was the major concern. The concern was not necessarily that alcohol was some inherent evil, but that alcohol cost money, and it was not necessary. It was unnecessary money spent from the household finances, spent in excess. And when we did that, when predominantly the men of the family would go out and spend money on alcohol, it would put the flourishing of the family at risk. By spending money on things that were unnecessary, the family might be put at risk of living in poverty, of living in suffering. And so the preacher would come into town and pull the Methodists out of the bar in order to help the community flourish, in order to help families flourish, in order for them not to suffer any longer, to move towards a time in which they could be well, really well. Because, this is God's dream for us, to be well and to flourish. Our economy, the economy of empire, the economy of the world, is based on the fact that some people will suffer. In fact, a lot of people will suffer. Most people will suffer so that a few can become rich, so that a few can have everything, can hold as much as more than anyone could possibly need or use. The economy of the world is dependent upon human suffering. God's economy is different than this. God's economy is based on the fact that humans and all life, everything that has the breath of life in it, will flourish. So we see these two economies, the economy of empire and the economy of God, in conflict all the time. We see it in conflict now. Will we go back to work so that we can, suffer and labor and expend our energy for a couple dollars, risking getting sick, getting other people sick? Will we perpetuate devastation in our communities in order to work so that other people can get rich? This is the question, and I don't have the right answer. It's an imperfect system. It's an imperfect economy. And I think that's the point. I think that's the point of the gospel. So we're kind of stuck in it. There are imperfect decisions to be made all the time because the system isn't set up for our flourishing. The gospel tells us about another way of being, a way of being and a system that we can make, a community we can build, in which the basis is human flourishing, in which the basis is that nobody suffers, in which the basis is that there is enough to go around. We don't need to hoard what we've got. We don't need to hoard all that we can get, because there is enough for everyone to have what they need. We learn about this radical way of being in the book of Acts, where people eat together and share what they have and pray, and everyone has enough and everyone is cared for. Everyone has what they need, where flourishing can emerge. In our scripture for today, it starts with a story about a girl in Macedonia. She has the ability to tell the future. She has a spirit of divination. She's able to project into the future. And people, of course, in an economy where flourishing is not the norm, where flourishing is ungraspable, it's unattainable, people are longing for assurance. So they seek that out and spend money on divination, on fortune telling. So this is an economy, this is a business that is happening in Macedonia. And this girl has the ability to tell the future. She is owned by other people who make money off of her gift, off of her ability to tell the future. She makes no money from this skill, from this talent that she has, from this marketable skill. She is owned by other people who get rich off of her work. She is a slave. She follows Paul and Silas through town. She follows them and is proclaiming over and over and over again all day to the townspeople that these people, these men, Paul and Silas, save people. They save people. They save people. They are from God. They save people. And she does this all day so that Paul gets annoyed with her saying it, that he turns around and he looks at her and he proclaims that that talent of hers, that marketable skill, be removed from her, be taken from her. And he does this not to further put her in suffering, but to free her from being exploited by the people who own her body, from the people who own her life. He frees her from the ability to work for them so that she can no longer work for them, so she's no longer valuable to them, and she is freed from their ownership and exploitation. So now money is lost. The people who lost money and who project continued loss of money get angry because when someone's flourishing, when someone's wealth is threatened, that disrupts the economy of empire. It disrupts the way that things are supposed to be, in which some people get rich and some people suffer. And the gospel always threatens that. It always threatens that. We see it over and over and over again. So Paul and Silas are jailed. They are imprisoned. They are in Macedonia because that is a punishable offense to free people from exploitation. It's a punishable offense in our world. So they are imprisoned, and there they sing, and through the night there is an earthquake, and they are miraculously freed from jail. So they go on, they visit Corinth and some other towns, and finally they feel called to Athens. So they go to Athens, and there they have interaction with the religious powers that be. So there the predominant religion is not Judaism, but is worship of Greek gods. And they go through the town and they can see that these people are deeply religious to the gods they worship. They purchase silver and gold and other metal idols of these gods to have shrines in their homes and in their workplaces and in public, in the marketplace. And there's one altar that is dedicated to an unknown God. Paul takes this opportunity, he sees this altar dedicated to an unknown God, and teaches the people of Athens that this unknown God can be known. That this unknown God is the creator of all things. That this unknown God gave each one of us breath. That this God of life sustains life and wants flourishing life for us all. That we are the image of God. That there's no need for idols. There's no need for things of silver and gold. There's no need to purchase a thing to know God, because we ourselves are the image of God. So he communicates this message that there's no need to purchase idols any longer. No need to purchase God. No need to purchase a miracle cure or the next secret to get rich. There's no need, because God can be known already in our life by our flourishing life in community where we share and break bread together and pray and sing, and where everyone has enough. So they go on, and Paul and Silas end up in Ephesus. And in Ephesus, there's a similar dynamic as Athens. And Paul and Silas proclaim and teach the way of Jesus, this way of Jesus, that Christ is the Messiah who has come to rescue us, who has come to save us. And that we can know God in our flourishing life by eating in community together, by breaking bread, sharing what we have, and making sure that everyone has enough. So they teach this way, and there in Ephesus there are a lot of people who were practicing magic arts in order to seek flourishing. in order to better their life. And when they hear this way of Jesus, that nothing else is needed to be purchased, nothing else is needed for us to do other than our own turning towards God, our own turning toward neighbor and eating together, that all of these people in Ephesus, in the town, come together and burn their books of magic arts. And they counted it up, and the total cost of all of these books is 50,000 silver coins, a tremendous amount of money. This they sacrificed, this they gave up, this they were freed from having to seek flourishing outside of their own life, outside of God, outside of their own community, which outside of sharing and breaking bread together. So together, right? So they do this, and what it does, what the effect is that people are no longer buying idols and books of magic arts. They're no longer buying the ingredients for what they need for the spells they'd cast, or any of the magic arts they were performing. It disrupted the economy of the place. So, in particular, the people, the silversmiths who made the idols for temple worship of the gods, were angry because they lost money. They lost their way to live and survive. They lost their way to either get rich or just get by. It was disrupted because people were no longer buying the idols that they made. So there was an uproar, because this is a punishable offense, to disrupt the money-making systems in our world. It is a punishable offense to disrupt the economy of empire. And this is what the gospel continually calls us to. The gospel calls us to set up a new economy, to set up a new way of being together, to set up a way that is predicated, that is based on human flourishing, not human prosperity, but human flourishing, like actual well-being of mind and body and heart and soul, where all of it is okay, where every part of the body, every person, every plant, everything that moves and breathes and has its being on the earth is well. The Acts of the Apostles, they see this and understand this new community, this new economy that's based on human flourishing. They see it as sitting around a table all together, breaking bread, sharing what we've got so that everyone has enough, taking particular care for widows and the most vulnerable, and singing and praying together. This is what the apostles imagine God's economy to look like. This is what they imagine will make possible human flourishing. I don't know when the next time will be that we can all sit around a table together, breaking bread, praying together, singing. I don't know. It's an odd time to reimagine the economy of God. And it's also the perfect time, because there is so much that is being asked of us. We are being asked by the economy of empire to risk our and others' well-being for the sake of money, for the sake of somebody getting rich, not us. It's never us. It is never the people who get to receive the money that's being earned. Someone else is always getting rich off our work. So we decide whether we need other people to work for us so that we can get our hair cut or get our nails done or whatever it is we want to do. Go to the store and look at clothes. Are we going to ask that people risk their human flourishing and the flourishing of their families so we can spend money? Is that what we're going to do? Or are we going to be people who set up another way of being? And maybe for now, that looks like staying home. Maybe that looks like for now, picking up the phone and calling a friend, calling someone else we typically sit by in church, and caring for their flourishing, in meeting a need for them, in sharing what we've got so that everybody has enough, taking particular care of the vulnerable in our community. Maybe it looks like praying from where we are for the flourishing of all human life. Thank you so much for joining us this morning. It is good to worship with you here on Sunday mornings. There's not a lot of announcements that I have this morning, except for the fact that on Thursday mornings, we gather on Facebook for singing the Psalms. So we've been doing that Thursday mornings at 10 o'clock. So you are welcome to join us there for that. It's been a good practice during this pandemic. The other piece of news that I have is that the bishop this last week put out another letter, another piece of direction for churches, and we are to remain closed at least through June 15th. So this gives us two-week cycles, which is how they are measuring the phases. So we are to have a decline in cases of COVID-19 for 2 weeks in each county, in each area, in order to consider moving to the next phase. So right now we are in phase 1. So I'm hoping that in the next week or so we will have a clearer plan for what it might look like for reopening in the future. So keep your eyes peeled for that. I also wanted to share with you a quick video from our bishop. She shared candidly about what values she is holding on to in this time and how she's making decisions out of those values. So you can just hear a little bit about her heart and where she is at on the matter.
I want to spend just a minute talking about my role in this. How come the bishop puts out these directives? Who's the bishop to do this? How does she make these determinations? And really, why should we pay any attention? I mean, if you're not thinking that, I think it all the time. And so I want to let you in kind of on what it's like to be me in this situation. I'm going to switch my glasses so I can read. In the United Methodist Church, the bishop is charged with giving leadership oversight to the spiritual and temporal matters of the church. And both are at work here, right? The life of the congregation, how we support one another, all the things we've been taught, how we love one another in the church and how we serve other people outside the church. That's all both spiritual and temporal. But with all of these, the disease itself and the kinds of restrictions that governmental leaders and healthcare leaders are putting on us, those are very temporal matters. And so what does it mean to be a spiritual community in the midst of that? And I take those responsibilities to give guidance to the church when it's in this complicated time where all kinds of currents are swirling around us. We're trying to figure out how to be faithful in the midst of that. One of the reasons it falls to the bishop, in my mind, is this is not a local issue. What we know is that a local decision, either a local governmental decision or a local church decision, has implications far beyond, because the virus does not follow our little local boundaries or the boundaries of our local communities. So each one of our church decisions could affect a widespread area depending on who might pass the virus from one to another. And so it requires oversight, and that's why governors are acting. That's why people continue to look to the White House for guidance nationally. That's why the World Health Organization tries to coordinate the response around the world. And in the church, it's the bishops that have that kind of regional oversight. So again, I take that responsibility seriously. I also take it seriously because it has become divisive, or it's becoming divisive in our communities, between our communities. I heard one of the governors once make a kind of snide remark about how, well, so-and-so, the governor on the other side of the state border had opened something up or had closed something down, and so people were pouring across the state boundary, right? It's become divisive. Different individuals think of it differently. Different communities think of it differently. And my hunch within the church is that it's helpful to us not to have every local church need to fight over what the opening dates and criteria are going to be. And so I take that on myself. Not because I think I'm smarter than anybody else, but because I'm in the role that the church has set up to provide that kind of consistency and oversight. And in the end, even if I were to say every local pastor, in conjunction with the trustees of their church, is free to make these decisions about whether and when to open separately, that would not relieve me of responsibility for the consequences of that. And I bear the burden of really feeling that I am responsible if we open too quickly and things go poorly. I am responsible for the distress that it causes the churches to stay closed longer. I understand all of that. I try and weigh it and keep it before me all of the time. So how do I lead? I've decided to lead. I've been leading. How do I lead? I'm really pretty deeply Wesleyan, as interpreted through Albert Outler in the 20th century, and I go to the quadrilateral, and I look to the sources of scripture, tradition, reason, and experience. I just find myself thrown back into the scriptures, just hunting, both thrown back to hunt down the scriptures that are helpful guidance, and also just awash with scriptures that come to me as I awaken in the morning, or as I'm pondering a dilemma before me, or as I'm looking. You may all see I've been posting photographs of wildflowers in our neighborhood. When I'm looking at a wildflower, the scriptures just are speaking to me on their own, and I am searching them out. In tradition, how has the church responded in the past in similar situations? In the 1980, and we get some of this on the news in the evening on the radio or on TV. 1918 pandemic, churches closed to prevent the spread of the flu. But also people served sacrificially at risk of their own personal health in order to care for those who were suffering and dying. So both of those, self-isolation to prevent the spread, and also that kind of very, very visceral and physical, personal sacrifice of health for the benefit of others. And then I turn to experience and reason first, sorry. And I really appreciate those of you who have mentioned the scientists. The scientists are amazing, and we know so much more than we would without the scientists. And yet, over and over again, I keep hearing the scientists say, there's a lot we don't know yet. We're still learning about this virus. We don't really know all about how it spreads, or all of the symptomatology about how the virus works in our bodies, affects our bodies. And so I really pay attention to the scientists, the epidemiologists, as well as the statistics that are posted on all of our state websites of the spread of the disease, of the death rate of the disease, of the current practice of testing and case tracing. And I'll just say that my observation is that all of the governors want there to be testing and case tracing, and none of them are satisfied with the level of that at this point. And yet, they seem to be progressing with the opening schedule that they initially published. So I'm a little skeptical about how well the science is being um, used to shape the public policy. And so, as not a public politician, but as a leader of the church, I may hold us to higher standards than our governors and county executives are holding us to. Um, and there are a couple of just horrifying experiential cases out there that keep me awake at night, and they should keep us all awake at night. And I'll reference them. I think Patrick and others have published these or links to them, or that we can do that again if we need to. But the Canadian example of a church that opened with all of the possible precautions you could hope for. And even so, this was early in the epidemic before we were closing things down. And many people became ill, and as a result of gathering for worship. And then on March 10th, there were 0 cases diagnosed in Skagit County. The Mount Vernon Community Chorus gathered. 60 members came to the rehearsal. None of them had symptoms. They practiced for 2.5 hours. They used hand sanitizer when they had arrived. They refrained from hugs and handshakes. And 3 weeks later, 45 were diagnosed with COVID or symptoms thereof, and 2 people died. We don't want that story in the LA Times from one of our churches. And it's not because of the publicity. We don't want to be a community that was incautious or quick to gather for legitimate spiritual yearnings and desires, but had the effect of compromising health in that horrifying way. So I consult all of those sources, and then I'm in conversation with the cabinet, with you in these webinars, and all of the chats and the questions and answers back and forth. I'm in consultation with my colleague bishops in the West and across the globe. And I take seriously the variety of perspectives that come that way. I especially try and listen to the voices of the most vulnerable among us. And I hope you heard that serious consideration in the notice that was put out early this morning, because it is the least of these. It is the most vulnerable that God especially, and Jesus modeled for us, patterning our own lives to care for and to be in solidarity with. And finally, I sit prayerfully with God. I ask God, what would you have me do? How are you working in the midst of this crisis that we're living through? What must I do? What are you compelling me to do? How do I live in this office? How do I use the authority of this office to serve your will and to serve the well-being not only of our churches, but of the communities that our churches are planted to serve? And then I make a decision, and I make it knowing that it isn't going to please everybody, and that some people are going to be mad at me and feel like I'm taking more authority than I was given, and that and that my judgments may be wrong. My decision may prove not to have been prudent and wise. And knowing that I may cause harm that I didn't intend. And I live with that. And I live with it with the confidence that Jesus gives us that what we do in love is redeemable. And so I humbly turn time and again to God to redeem whatever errors I make in my life. And then day by day, I watch the results, and some people won't follow the directives, and some people will politicize my leadership, and some of you will say, thank you, thanks for taking this burden off of us. And then in my prayers, I ask God for forgiveness for the errors.
I don't know what the future looks like for us, but we are going to take that journey together, and I'll keep you updated as I know more. I hope that you are doing well where you are, and that you will reach out to me or to somebody if you are struggling. This is a hard moment, and I hope and pray that we can be community for each other, surrounding each other, so that we all have enough love and enough food and enough roof over our heads. So let us be that for you. Let me be that for you. That is our call as Christian people. So please do not hesitate to reach out. My contact information will be at the end of this video. As always, we appreciate chipping in a couple bucks for the work of our church. Even though we are not meeting in person, we don't stop being the church. We want to serve our community, and there are some really great ways we can do that during this time. So if you would like to give in a meaningful way, you can give to our church or to the conference-wide effort to help families who are in need. So if you received your stimulus check from the recent stimulus plan and you don't need all of it, then you can redirect some of that money or other money that you have access to, redistribute it to families in need. This is one way that we are living out the call of the apostles in our world today. God bless you and keep you. May God make God's face shine upon you and give you peace. Amen.